We're going to talk about the history of the vasectomy. Vasectomies, a simple procedure that, with minimal complications, has massive potential for great female recognition. In the United States, a country of over 320 million people, less than 8% of men between the ages of 15 and 44 use vasectomy as a method of family planning. It is estimated that around 500,000 vasectomies are performed each year, while approximately 700,000 female sterilization procedures, that is, tubal ligations, are performed during the same time. Unfortunately, despite the fact that vasectomy is less invasive, much simpler, safer, cheaper, and more affordable overall, men and families have insufficient knowledge about the simple avenue that vasectomies represent for an active participation of men in contraception. Very few countries like Canada, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Spain, and South Korea have a considerable male participation that is higher, with vasectomies being more common than tubal ligations. We are quite behind on that still. For us to be able to understand what this is, it is important to review how we ended up here. Let me review with you briefly how it is that we came up with the idea of vasectomies. The first descriptions of the anatomy of the male reproductive system were made back in Greece before even the Christian era. However, this was limited to the description of what we know now as the vas deferens, the testicles, and the arteries and veins of these structures. It was not until the 14th century, it took too long, at the beginning of the Renaissance, that descriptions of the function of the vas deferens were made in Italy. Then later, in the 16th century, experiments were made initially in dogs showing some changes in the vas deferens before intercourse. Once again, for several centuries until the 19th century, no additional work was done, and a British surgeon, Sir Astley Cooper, showed that the ligation, or cutting the vas deferens, did not cause any damage to the testicle. These were the very first experiments of a vasectomy, which literally means cutting the vas deferens. Vasectomy means that. Around the same time, other researchers were able to demonstrate in other species like rabbits that the vasectomy caused no issues or damage to the testicles. We do know that still nowadays. It was not until the end of the 19th century that the procedure was considered for humans. A French urologist called Felix Guyon started suggesting that the vasectomy could be used as part of treatment for problems associated with the prostate and treatment of the problems associated with the management of prostate issues. Today, this is not indicated, but that was the first use in humans. An interesting and revolutionary indication at the time had to do with an Austrian surgeon called Eugen Steinach. After more than 20 years of research in the function of testicles, his findings led him to believe that a vasectomy could be used to rejuvenate and reinvigorate an individual. This was a conclusion he came up with after working with rats. He announced that he had rejuvenated an old rat and that the procedure could be applied to humans. As you can imagine, this was not only revolutionary, but extremely popular back in the day. Dr. Steinach was so successful with his theory that he was nominated not once but twice for the Nobel Prize in Medicine. Even the famous psychiatrist Sigmund Freud underwent the famous Steinach Operation in order to help treat a jaw cancer that he had and to improve his sexuality. Dr. Steinach's observations lacked evidence as they could not be reproduced by others. Therefore, and with the understanding and isolation of the hormone testosterone, the popularity of the procedure declined. However, the procedure was still continued well until the 1950s. It was not that long ago. Perhaps one of the most controversial moments for sterilization procedures, both vasectomies and tubal ligations, was their use with eugenic purposes. Eugenics was the imposition of sterilization in many frail persons and those unable to make decisions, like prisoners or individuals with mental health issues, with the purpose of, quote, getting rid of genetic diseases among the human race, unquote. This was suggested in the late 19th century and was, without a doubt, a clear expression of abuse and a blatant infringement of the fundamental rights of individuals. Unfortunately, by the end of the 1930s, 32 states in the United States already had regulations for the practice of involuntary sterilization for criminals. Similar regulations were implemented in Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, Finland, and Germany, where the Nazis gave a clear example of their abuse. Fortunately, by the end of the 1960s, this practice was discontinued, just for the sake of the defense of the fundamental rights of individuals. However, this background caused fear in the medical professionals when the procedures were voluntarily requested for contraceptive reasons. Therefore, some organizations began to establish guidelines to carry out this sterilization procedures. Unfortunately, those guidelines ended up limiting the access for those procedures by those wanting to get them freely and voluntarily. For example, and without any basis or evidence, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists suggested a formula that limited who could undergo a sterilization procedure. They said that it was indicated only for those whose age multiplied by their number of children equals or exceeds 120, meaning that in order for you to have a sterilization procedure at the age of 30, you must have had 4 children already. No basis for that. As an interesting fact, an antiquated law by Napoleon condemned, quote-unquote, any mutilation procedure, which included vasectomies. For this reason, vasectomies actually were illegal in France until 2001, just 21 years ago. Today, we recognize the advantages of vasectomy in family planning. This is a procedure that had an initial application for prostate issues, then it became an imposition made by some with a clear xenophobic, discriminatory, and even racist intent. Now, this is a voluntary tool for men to be able to express our willingness to participate more actively in contraceptive decisions. It is up to us to decide if we want to be actively involved in these contraceptive decisions.